Hi, this is Dr. Swanberg. We're going to talk today about active reading, and we're going to talk about the best reading practices and ways to build your vocabulary. When I say active reading, what I mean is really the opposite of passive reading, where you sit there and you turn a lot of pages and you realize your mind's been wandering and it's been a long time since you actually read or understood any words. That's one form of passive reading. Another form of passive reading is when you thought you read the assignment and you get to class and people start discussing it and you realize that you don't remember any of it. Or you show up to the test and you realize you just didn't retain what you read. That's a result of passive reading. Active reading is reading in such a way that you learn from what you read and can remember what you read when you close the book. It's different from reading for pleasure. When you read for pleasure, it's okay if you don't remember all the details or skip some words you don't know. When you read for pleasure, it's totally okay to just get the gist or get the idea and move on. But active reading is what you do when you absolutely need to learn from what you read and retain that information. Active reading is required in a lot of situations. First and foremost, it's required when you're going to be tested on the material, whether that's a test for your job. I know there's a lot of tests if you're going to be an emergency medical technician. I know there's a lot of tests if you're going to be a nurse. And those tests happen even after you're in the profession, when there are new procedures or new policies to be followed, or even new techniques. So it's important to be able to read about those things and be ready for the test. It happens all the time in college, and you know that already. When you have to know the material to function well at work, if you've got a new manual with a whole bunch of new procedures and you need to know it before your next shift on the floor, then it's absolutely important that you do some active reading. It's important when you have to respond to the material intelligently. If you are a teacher and you've gotten an email from a parent, you have to do some active reading and make sure you respond to that parent in a way that's not going to escalate the situation or frustrate them. When the material is hard for you, it's better to do active reading. I know it's tempting to just do passive reading and just get it over with as quickly as possible, but if it's hard for you, you've really got to slow down and use some of these techniques for reading to make sure that you're understanding it. And we do assume in college that a lot of the material is hard for you. If it weren't hard for you, you wouldn't need college instructors to help you through it. Excuse me. When the material is boring to you, but you need to know it anyway, that's a really good time for active reading. And here's a secret. Your college teachers know that some of this stuff bores you. We know that you have to take a lot of required classes, and not all of them are your cup of tea. But we do expect you to be able to muscle up and find some tools for getting through that situation with good grades. You don't have to love it all, but active reading is what you do when you need to figure out how to get it done anyway. The parts of active reading are explained in your chapter in The Art of Critical Reading that covers the same topic as this lecture, and they call it SQ3R, or Survey, Question, Read, Review, Recite. So 3 R's, a Q, and an S. Survey, Question, Read, Review, Recite. Survey means to scan what you are about to read and get a general idea of how long it'll take and how it's organized. Question means to gather or read your questions ahead of time, know what you're looking for as you read, and make reading a scavenger hunt for answers. It's much more easy to stay focused if you're looking for something. Number 1 is for read. Read and take notes in a notebook. Reading with the music on and really not totally paying attention, that's not really reading. Reading and taking notes is important. Review, that's where you review any parts that confuse you, including words you need to stop and look up, getting answers from a teacher about questions that you have, or even checking in with a discussion group to make sure that you're understanding what you read. If it's confusing at first, bring those questions that you write down while you're reading into class, review it, and then give it another read. Recite does not mean that you have to know the book by heart. It just means you close the book and make sure you know what the reading said. This is when you try to answer your study questions without looking. And if you can't, then you've got to go back and repeat some steps. Let's take a look at the S for survey. It's important to survey your reading assignments early in the week so you know how much time to budget for reading. And this, entails not only how long the assignment is, but how hard it is and how quickly you read. But it's important to get a lay of the land. It's important to survey so you know how the reading is organized. This will save you time, especially if you know that certain parts will be more important than others. If there are some sections of a chapter that you know for sure your teacher's going to want you to cover, then you can focus on those and then read the others a little bit more quickly. It's important to get a sense of how difficult the reading will be. If it's going to have a lot of new vocabulary words, you might need to have your glossary or dictionary handy. And this also helps you budget your time and gather the resources you'll need to be successful, instead of sitting down in the library and planning that to be your time to read it and then realizing you need a dictionary and you don't have one. And that just slows you down to a crawl. So surveying is important. Q is for question. It's important to know what questions you'll be expected to be able to answer before you begin reading. Sometimes your reading will have study questions at the end. This happens in a lot of textbooks, so read those first. Sometimes your instructor will give you a reading guide or a study guide, and you should definitely read that first. Sometimes you may need to reread something if questions arise after you've read the assignment and discussed it in class. I can't tell you how many times in college I had to read something and then go to class and ask some questions and listen to this discussion and then go back and read it again after class. And sometimes just reading something twice is really the only way to get it through. Our number 1 means read, and we mean actively. You should be taking notes as you read. In fact, you should absolutely be taking notes as you watch a video lecture as well. Pause it whenever you've got a screen and make some notes for what's important about that screen. It's better to take notes than to highlight, even if you've got a paper copy, because it's a little bit harder than highlighting. It's really easy to end up with a yellow page just full of highlighting and still not be able to find the piece of information you're looking for. Because it's harder to copy something from the book into your notes, it means that you have to pay more attention and make more decisions about what's important, and that keeps you focused. Underline any word that is new to you as you read. You could also highlight it, especially if it's on a computer or an app. Don't stop to look them up every single time you get to a word that you don't know. Do try to guess based on content, highlight it, and then move on. And then when you've got a bunch of them, you look them up all at the same time and go back through and read it again. But stopping to look up each one at the moment you realize you don't know it slows you down way too much. Still, it's not acceptable to just plow past it. You do have to make a note of it and learn the word. Write down questions about passages you don't understand and try to explain what's confusing you. Instead of just saying, I don't get this part, try something more specific, like, why did the men fall overboard? And why is the guy laughing about it? And get in touch with what you do know to help you focus on articulating what it is you don't know. Our number 2 means review. That's where you check your notes against your class notes or with a peer. If your notes don't match what the teacher gave in class, you should bring that up and ask a question. If your notes don't match what your peers are saying in discussion board, you might want to talk about what you've interpreted differently from them. Sometimes there are different perspectives, but sometimes you might have gotten something a little bit wrong, and they might have a better read on it. Once you have got the answers to those questions, you should reread. Ask your questions to your peers and your instructor, and once you have those answers, reread. Look up the words you underlined. Make sure you understand them and choose a simple synonym or a word that means the same thing to replace them. Keep a list of these words or write down the synonym above the word in the text and then reread. Notice that all 3 of these ask you to reread, and that's really important because it's rare that reading something difficult for you is going to stick in your head the first time through. Our number 3 means recite. You don't usually have to memorize the whole text word for word. That's not what we mean when we say recite. What you do need to be able to do is make sure you can answer your study questions or summarize the major details of the text without looking at it. You should be able to close the book and have a good discussion about the book without looking at it. If you can't yet, it's time to reread. If you go into class on a ground class or you go into a discussion board and the teacher asks a question, you have to run to your book or stare at your book to look for the answer. You didn't read quite actively enough and you need to step up your game a little bit. Here are some tools for building your vocabulary, which is a really important goal in our class. Number 1, a print or an online dictionary. These are the absolute best tool for building your vocabulary and understanding what you read. To me, it doesn't matter whether you use a print dictionary or an online dictionary. I see benefits to both. A print dictionary offers the advantage of showing you the other words near the one you were looking up, which can show you perhaps words that you were mistaking for the one you were thinking of, or words that are related. Online dictionaries have an awesome feature where there's a little play button that helps you pronounce the word because it'll say it out loud for you, and those are fantastic. You should definitely use that. A thesaurus tells you synonyms for the word, but needs to be used with a dictionary. Please don't choose to use a thesaurus without using a dictionary. It's likely to have you calling somebody's green army pants verdant, which actually, yeah, technically means green, but it's like a bright glowing green of like grass in the springtime. It's definitely not what you mean when you're talking about army pants. So be careful when you use a thesaurus to choose words you really know. A glossary is a list of terms in a book, usually a textbook, but I've seen them in a novel. In particular, I saw it in a novel called Matterhorn, where there was a lot of military jargon. They included a glossary of those military terms. Glossaries are useful, but they're limited. They don't usually offer everything a dictionary can offer, and they usually only include the definition that's pertinent to the reading. So your best tool for building your vocabulary is simply the dictionary. It's also important to give a shot at building vocabulary in context. In context means with the text around the unfamiliar word. It's often possible to get a good guess at the meaning of a word from the sentences around the word, and you should do this as you read. Guessing is good. However, guessing is not a substitute for looking up the word. You might have guessed wrong and be getting a whole sentence wrong or a whole passage wrong because of it. Imagine you keep reading in lots of romance novels about clandestine affairs, and these clandestine affairs are sexy and romantic, and it's what the people do who are passionately in love, and you think clandestine must mean sexy and romantic. And then you're reading a book about war, and these two army guys decide to have a clandestine meeting, and you're thinking, what? These guys are in love? You say, no, wait a second, I gotta look this up. Maybe it doesn't mean what I thought it means. Well, it turns out clandestine doesn't mean sexy and romantic. Clandestine means secret. So the army guys are not in love, they're just having a secret meeting. So you can make some really embarrassing mistakes if you don't look up the word. It's okay to guess from context and get the general gist, but make sure you double check it in the dictionary. Let's take a look at what a dictionary offers. A dictionary offers a pronunciation guide. A dictionary offers all the definitions of a word. A dictionary tells you how the word behaves as it changes through different parts of speech. Some words can be nouns, change a little bit when they're a verb. They change a little bit again when they're an adjective or an adverb. A dictionary offers an example of the word used in a sentence. And a dictionary often offers synonyms, which are really exciting because those are really useful when it comes to rereading a passage that was confusing because of a lot of new vocabulary. Let's take a look at a dictionary entry. Let's bear with me while I open this hyperlink. And here we are looking at a dictionary from the Merriam-Webster Online Dictionary, which is a reliable dictionary. And you can see here that it has the definitions 1 and 2, insolent or rude in speech and behavior. And you can kind of focus in, if you don't know the word insolent, you can focus on rude in speech or behavior. But notice that these are linked. If you don't understand part of the definition, you really need to look up that word too. If it had just said insolent in speech or behavior, you'd have to track down the meaning of the word insolent before you moved on. You can see that it gives examples of petulant. Her tone was petulant and angry. And it even gives the origin. And look at this. This is fun. It gives you how it's pronounced. See? Petulant. And it pronounces it for you. Let's see if I can get it down in the screen. Aha. And so you can repeat that as many times as you need to so that you can understand the word. Aha. All right. Excellent. Let's get back to our PowerPoint. All right, and move right along. A couple of friendly reminders about using the dictionary. First, you can't just use the dictionary any more than you can just guess based on context. You have to put context and the definitions together. It's important to know if there are two definitions of the word ape, which one your author is using. Does he mean the noun, a hairy animal, or the verb, to mimic or imitate? And it would make a big difference to your sentence which one it means. A port, for example, can be anything from a plug in your wall to a place where ships drop off commerce. So it's pretty important to know which definition makes sense in context. Look up the words in the definition that you don't know. If petulantly is defined as insolent behavior or behaving in a petulant manner, you still don't know what that means. You're going to have to look up petulant or insolent or any of these other words that are unfamiliar to you. You're going to have some patience in tracking it down. And then once you've looked it up, you're not done. You actually have to learn the words. You've got to make them your own, or you'll be stuck in a dictionary forever. The more you use a word, the more you'll own it. So it's important to try using it as often and as soon as you can after you've tried to learn it. Quick recap. Active reading is required when you need to retain and comprehend the material. Active reading follows the SQ3R process: survey, question, read, review, recite. Active reading requires note-taking. Active reading requires vocabulary building. A dictionary is your best friend when building your vocabulary or reading actively, and you need to use a dictionary responsibly. Now, if you did not actively read the slides in this presentation while you were listening, if you did not actively listen, if you did not take notes, if you cannot close the presentation and tell me what you learned, you need to read it again.